Hi and welcome back to the channel. We're going to cover the second service that I've just had on the BMW R1250GS at 6,500 miles. I've put a couple of markers in so that you can skip if you need to, but there's an introduction at the beginning of the video while I'm riding up to the dealership for maybe 5 or 6 minutes, and then there's a little bit of riding on a couple of models that I did at the dealership if you wanted to watch that. But if not, you can just skip to the last portion that I've marked up for you, where I give you the conclusions, the cost and what they've actually done in the service. So hopefully you'll enjoy it, hopefully you'll stick for the whole thing, but if not, you can move to those markers. So let's have a look. So here I am just before 7:30 on a Thursday morning, and I'm on my way to have the bike serviced in Oxford. You may ask why Oxford when I live in Southampton, with the nearest dealer I think being Barnstormers in Alton, and it's a little historical. I had the 1200 for a few weeks, and then the 1250 came out, and for a couple of issues with the 1200, which I'll not go into, not my issues but the bike's issues, I certainly tried to get myself into a 1250, and North Oxford garages at Oxford, now currently actually at Longhammer in a temporary site, because their showroom's being upgraded. They did me a phenomenal deal. I mean, found me what was a brand new model bike, which in itself was probably a little tough because I know they've been in short supply certainly over the last sort of 6 months that they've been out, but found me a bike. It had the blue option on it and was fully loaded other than that, so they threw in the blue option and they just did me a very, very good deal. Gave me all my money back on the 1200. I didn't lose a penny on that, so I like to reward that loyalty by giving them a service. Whether that's any good for them or not, I don't honestly know, but it's just a thing that I'm sort of happy to do. It's a 70 mile up, 70 mile back, thereabouts trip from Southampton to Oxford, but it's another excuse to ride the motorbike. So what am I expecting to get out of the service today? Well, there's quite a few things. There's a couple of things that I want them to have a look at. The back brake has huge amounts of travel and really doesn't work particularly well at all. A friend of mine bought a GS 1250 Adventure on the same day I did, November the 2nd, 2018, and his went exactly the same while we were riding around Scotland. We've both done similar miles. He took his in for service on Saturday. They bled the brakes, and he said now he's got a perfectly adequate back brake. I say adequate because of course back brakes are never quite as good as front brakes, and the front brake on this BMW is superb, and of course when you apply the front brake it's applying a 60-40 balance to the back brake anyway. So I'm looking for them to have a look at the brake. I've also got an issue which is intermittent. We'll see if it's intermittent today. If we go into my vehicle and the settings, no, it is actually faulty today as well. If you have a look on the oil pressure or level, I'm not sure, I think it's probably level indicator here, I've just got 3 grey bars, and that goes from, or should be, green as you see all the rest of the icons, but it's grey at the moment with just 3 dots, and it intermittently goes to OK. And I know I've got enough oil in. I checked it actually before I left, and indeed I put some in when I got back from Scotland, and I've not ridden the bike at all really since then, so there's plenty of oil in the bike, and it's either a sensor issue or it's a TFT firmware stroke software issue, and I'm not really sure which one. However, I am having the firmware updated today on the TFT screen, and we'll see whether that makes a difference. That's an interesting issue with BMW dealers, in as much as if you do have the TFT software and firmware upgraded, they really want it for the entire day. That's because they never quite know how long it's going to take. I did have it upgraded at the first service, and that took about 2.5 to 3 hours, but they do say it can take anything from a few minutes to all day. So that's early this morning. I've got a 8:30 appointment, and I imagine they will service the bike and then flash the TFT for firmware and software, and that means that I can basically kick around during the day, and they can stick the bike in a corner and just let it mosey away to itself. I'm having a loan bike. I've no idea what the loan bike is today. I have requested via the salesman, which might be detached of course from the service department, but via my salesman I did request if he could try and get me either a K1600 or a 1250 Adventure, both bikes I'd like to ride. I'm very happy with this bike and I'm not looking to change it, but certainly I do like the Adventure. I just like the extra range of the Adventure, although this one's got a couple of 100 miles of range. That extra 100 miles would be absolutely fantastic in Scotland. I did notice it, although we were with a pair of sports bikes, so it didn't notice hugely that there was a problem with a 200-mile range. But I do like, and I like the road presence of the Adventure, but hopefully we might get a go on that. But even more so, I'd like to have a go on the 1600, because as I get older, that's probably a bike I would certainly be interested in looking at into the future, just on the basis that it's even more of a mile cruncher than this bike is, and as I don't really use this bike off-road, I probably wouldn't miss the features of that. In any case, as I say, it's not a bike I'm looking to upgrade now, but I'm just thinking that the K1600 may get its major upgrade like the 1250 did. It might get the TFT fitted and all of those types of things in the next maybe 12 months to 18 months, and that may well put me in the frame for changing the bike. So anyway, we'll report in if we get a ride on a bike that's of any interest as we ride around. If not, then I'll give you a little bit of an update when I've had the service done as to the cost and what they fixed and what they said, and you know, how the general experience was. So one way or the other, you'll hear from me in a bit. So we're off the A34 and onto the country roads now, just going past Blenheim Palace to my right, home of Winston Churchill, can you believe? And in fact, the village that I'm in is Blaydon. I used to live up this way, so I know a little bit about it, but the village that I'm in is Blaydon, and Blaydon has a church here on the left-hand side. I think it's a Norman church. Certainly it's got a tower. And that's actually where Winston Churchill is buried, in a very fine plot at the front of the church. And well, I guess maybe it's the side of the church, and all of his family are there, so his wife, sons, etc. And in fact his grave, as you would maybe expect, is far grander than any of the Dukes and Duchesses of Marlborough, who are the owners of Blenheim Palace, who have just normal gravestones within the churchyard. So in fact the church is just up behind the primary school here on the left hand side. I don't know whether we can see it from the road. There we go, it's on the left hand side. Well, there's the war memorial, and it's up behind that bank. It is actually just drizzling with rain, which wasn't at all forecast. It's currently 14 degrees. It was 15 when I left home, and I've opted to wear my mesh jacket and trousers because it was rumoured to be getting to 21 today, and I'm not generally a cold person. I don't feel cold now, in fact, but it's just about on the borderline of being able to wear a mesh jacket and trousers, and mesh gloves, in fact. So I've actually got my heated grips on, number one, as we can see here on the TFT. So we're just round the corner now, so literally a couple of miles, and we'll be pulling into North Oxford Motorrad BMW. Okay, so here we are. They occupy the BMW or Mini showroom that's been here for quite some time actually. So they're literally just here on the left hand side. Seem to have something being set up out the front here this morning. I'll park my bike out the way. So there we are, 6,587 miles, and she's in for a service. Good old Bertha. Well, here's a surprise for everybody. The loan bike that I managed to get today was supposed to be a K1600 or a 1250 Adventure. So what have I ended up with? An R-NineT racer. It's got to be about the most uncomfortable bike I've ever ridden. Just going past Blenheim Palace, as you can see, in Woodstock. So I've only literally driven it, or ridden it rather, probably 3 miles. And at my age, I don't need to be racked over like this. I mean, it sounds great, and it probably, once I got it on the open road, would be great, but this isn't a bike that you could do many miles on. The seat already feels hard. Admittedly, I have come up from Southampton, so I've already done 70 miles on a motorbike, so maybe not ideal, but the riding position, I've got my feet leaning backwards. I mean, it's a typical sports bike type ride, which, as I say, at my age is maybe not the thing to be doing. It is drizzling, which is never forecast, which I'm a bit disappointed about, really, because I've worn my mesh gear. There's no luggage on here whatsoever, so I've had to leave everything else in my bike, so I've got no wet weather gear. I am not intending to be doing hundreds of miles on this for sure, but they have, in fairness to North Oxford Garages, given me a voucher for, I think it's called the Arty Cafe in Enston, to have breakfast. But I'm going to say that if this continues to rain like it's currently doing, I should be getting off, parking up and sitting in a cafe all day. So anyway, quite a funny thing. It is got this option 719 paintwork and billeting on the cylinder heads and everything, which is quite nice. I may actually get a picture of it in a minute that you can have a look at, so you can actually see it. It's a pretty looking bike, but just at my age, it's not the style of bike that I was hoping that I was going to be doing a few miles on today while I waited for mine. Anyway, there it is. Let's get on to the Arty Cafe and we'll see how we feel from there. Well, I'd say one thing for it, it might not be comfortable, but it's quite good fun. I wouldn't want to be in this prone position for more than probably an hour, but now we got into the middle of the day, the roads are dry and the sun's come out a little bit. It does make this bike quite a bit of fun. On these country roads, just flatting around at, well, just about legal speed limit. Just have to watch for these crossroads, which can be a little tricky, but all the same. Heading our way down now into Cholbury from Enston, where we just stopped at the Art Yard Cafe for a free breakfast on BMW Motorrad North Oxford Garages, so all good. Suspension's very hard on this beast. Surprise, surprise. I got back to the dealership and Rian, who's the salesman who has sold me actually both bikes, was actually in, and I asked him if he got my email in the week, which he denied he had, so I believe him on that, but he has put me directly and straight onto a 1600 for a little, well, he said if I'm going to be much more than an hour, let him know, but I'm only going to be half an hour because I've got to pick my bike up, which I've just noticed has been finished, and get myself back home because that's going to take about an hour. So here we are then on the 1600. First thoughts are it feels very, very low in comparison to mine, and whilst it is a real old ship with a, I did say ship then by the way, with a 1600 6-cylinder engine, it does feel low and at the moment with less road presence than my GS, because with that I'm sat much higher. But anyway, this is really just satisfying a curiosity for me. I've ummed and ahed about what I do next as I get older, It's wrong to say you're giving in on, you know, sports bikes and the like, because I know a lot of people who ride sports bikes and are way older than me already, but eventually if I want to do some miles on a bike, it's either got to be something like a GS, which is a fantastic bike. I'm really pleased with my bike, but of course it has that dynamic that allows you to go off-road with it, so if you don't use that, you're maybe only using half of its potential, whereas if you wanted to do miles, then supposedly this would be the beast to have. Anyway, we'll have a little bit of a ride on it, we'll see how we get on. I'll maybe give you a little more footage of me actually riding it. That I would say to you that straight away, just with less than a mile under my belt, it feels smooth with that 6-cylinder engine rather than the horizontally opposed 2-cylinder boxer engine. I was going to say Boxster then, boxer engine. So anyway, we'll see in a minute and I'll let you know how I feel about it at the end. Okay, so we've now done a few miles on her. She is a very low seating position, and I've got the screen in the mid position, because when you get it in the upper position, I'm looking through the screen and I don't know, it sort of distorts the view a little bit, so I like to have it where it is. But anyway, we've hit a little bit of motorway now, so we'll just see how effortlessly she should do this this bit of faster stretch of road. The most random thing in the world, I've just switched it off only because it'll fire some copyright things on YouTube, but I did actually have the radio on a moment ago, and obviously it blares out of these speakers left and right. The quality of the sound is actually tremendous, but I don't know how loud it is while you're actually going through villages and various other things. But anyway, I've turned it off for the time being because otherwise I get copyright hits on YouTube. It's quite funny actually, because she's quite a big boat, and well, as I said earlier, but she does waver a little bit. That might be tracks in the road. Sometimes these roads that are occupied heavily by lorries eventually get tracks where the lorries have run down the same strip. But she just feels a little bit sort of wobbly, but not ridiculously. And obviously I'm only just starting to ride her. I mean, certainly wind protection is beyond belief. And as I say, I've only got the screen in the mid position. If I put it in the upright position, it comes a long way. I mean, I'm a relatively tall chap, 6'1", but I seem to be looking through that screen about 3 or 4 inches from the top of it, which is, it's okay. It's not actually distorted. It's just not that comfortable, because it's not like looking through a windscreen. And certainly if you put it all the way down, she does go all the way down, and that's giving me a fair amount of buffeting on my visor, and you've probably sensed from the sound the amount of wind noise that has increased. Unfortunately, it's got roadworks on this road, so we're not going to be able to give her a real good blast, but certainly up to and very slightly over the legal speed limit was simplicity itself. Very comfortable, very quiet, and very smooth. Let's put the screen back up so that I'm not getting quite so buffeted. And that's somewhere near, actually that's probably somewhere near comfortable for me, just so I can see over the top. Okay, well that was a fun ride. we're now back home, well, back to her home, where we'll drop her off and switch her out for the 1250. We'll see how much the service has been, and I'll do a little bit of a sit down and a update on what's actually happened with the bike, so that you'll get a decent idea of what you can expect when your bike comes in.
So there was my servicing experience. Once again, a good experience in general from North Oxford garages in Oxford. Everybody could moan about the price of a service, but this is my first full service on the bike. I did have 3 issues that I wanted them to sort out, and they've pretty much fixed all of those. Well, they've either fixed them or they've told me what the issue was. The first one was the TFT screen. I wanted the firmware and software upgraded to the latest release, which they did. The service itself, I believe, took about an hour, so I was in at 8:30. That would have been done by 9:30. The bike itself was actually ready to collect at about 2:30, so you can work out yourself how long the TFT upgrade takes. Any dealer will tell you they've no idea how long it will take. It depends really on what version from and what version to, and even then it's an indeterminate amount of time. So mine took, I'm guessing, somewhere in the region of 6 hours. And to be totally technical, mine was at a software version of 001_018_040 when I took it into the dealership. When I collected it, it was on 001_019_180. Now it is quite interesting. Maybe I'd know North Oxford garages enough to be able to get them to try and find out, but I haven't done to date as to what the actual release notes are of all these various versions, because I took about 40 pictures of the old screens and settings before I took it in, and I've looked at it fairly briefly, but looked at it certainly when I've come back, and the only difference that I can really see are trivial things like the specification for the front and rear tyre pressures for some reason has now gained or changed and gained a decimal point. So rather than being 36 and 42 from memory, front and rear respectively, it's now 36.8 and 43.6 or something random like that. I'll show you the pictures so we can get that precisely right. Other than that, I really can't see anything. Obviously there have been changes, otherwise they wouldn't have made so many updates from the version I had to the version I now have. The only other thing that I may be imagining, but quite often when I take my bike out, start the music up, music's going in my helmet quite happily, and I walk to the gate to undo the gate to get the bike out, I'll normally lose that Bluetooth connection. And I just noticed that this time the Bluetooth sang away quite happily. The music didn't interrupt, didn't go flaky, didn't go jerky or anything. I was hoping that the time in which it takes the Bluetooth to connect to give you a little more confidence, and that the actual connections itself would be far more reliable. But I'm getting used to resetting that, and I'll probably do a video on that at some point so that people can see just what I do with my settings. The other thing I did hope is that it would fix my oil level indicator light, which quite often reads okay, green, beautiful on the TFT, and other times it's just grey with 3 grey dashes. Now, dealers will give you all kinds of information as to why that is. It's faulty sensors, it's you probably didn't measure it right, it's flaky, all sorts of reasons that you get for that. I actually have a piece of paper here which I will put into the video in a second, which you can sit and read at your leisure. I gotta say, it's a BMW piece of paper, so I totally believe my dealer. They've printed it off. It's slightly farcical how that light, the conditions that that light needs to be showing correctly. And I think probably eventually it's something that they will either fix or they'll lower the thresholds that you have to reach for it to come on. So anyway, it was all good. The brake pads were good. The back brake, which I did have a problem with, too much travel and not working very well, they fixed. I think they could have fixed it by bleeding the brakes. They have actually changed the front and rear brake fluid and charged me for that as well. It's contradictory. In the book it says it doesn't need doing. On the service schedule that I got printed off again here by BMW, it does say that the brake fluid needs changing at the first year and then year 3. So they have changed the brake fluid and charged me for it. I'll put some pictures of these on so that you can see what they actually did. I've had my book stamped, so although they say it's available electronically, I do like to have it in the book. So that's the 2 stamps I've got for the first service and now for the 6,500. And what did it cost me? So the service, replacement of the oil filter and the oil and a sump washer and the brake fluid on the front and rear brakes changing was a total of £239.10. So that's obviously sterling, Great British pounds. It's on the high side. Certainly when you get told when you buy these things the cost of a service, they'll normally tell you that it's about £135 or £150, but it's £239.10. But the bike is good. The brake pads were passed. They've still got plenty of meat on them. The tyres, of course, were passed because I only changed the front one recently, and the rear one has been changed after I had a puncture. So all in all, the discs, the pads, all read well. Just for information, the pads had 4mm of wear left. I don't know what they start at, but 4mm of wear, so they're classed as good. Anyway, that was it. That was my experience with the service. I hope you found that sort of enjoyable or different, and for those of you that have got 1250s and not got to the mileage that I have yet, you'll know what you've got upcoming. If you like the video, perhaps you could give me a like. Likes always help. Subscribe if you feel that you find the channel information interesting, and we'll just hope to see you next time. Thanks a lot for viewing.